Good evening, everyone. Happy Chanukah. This week's Parshas Miketz, Tavshin Pei Daled. And I would like to talk about one item in the Parsha and then something about Chanukah. Okay. Now, we will start Perek Mem Beis, chapter 42. And we'll start from Pasuk Zayin. No, actually we can start from Pasuk Hey, verse 5. Perek Beis, chapter 42, Pasuk Hey, verse 5. Okay, so at this point in time, there is a famine, and everybody's going to Egypt to buy food. So Pasuk Hey, verse Hey, Pasuk Hey reads, the sons of Yisrael came to buy grain amongst those who came, because the famine was in the land of Canaan. Yosef Yosef is a ruler over the land. He's the one who supplies the grain for all the people of the land. The brothers of Yosef came, and they bowed down to him to the ground. Okay. Yosef Yosef for his brothers, and he saw his brothers, and he recognized them. He acted as a stranger to them. He spoke with them harshly. And he said to them, from where do you come? When they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Yosef recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Pasuk Tes. Now this is going to be the verse that we're going to be primarily focused on. Yosef remembered the dreams that he had dreamed to them, that he told to them. He said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the weakness of the land. Now, by just reading Pasuk Tes, the Pasuk says, the brothers came, they bowed down, he asked them where they came from, and then it says, Yosef remembered his dreams. And then he said to them, you're spies. So what exactly is this connection between Yosef remembering his dreams and now accusing them of being spies? Clearly, one is leading into the other. But what is that connection? So the first item here for today I want to share with you is the Ramban, Nachmanides' approach to actually this entire episode between Yosef and his brothers. When Yosef accuses them of being spies, and he gets them to bring down Binyamin, and at the end of the Parsha, Binyamin actually comes down, and he plants his goblet in Binyamin's backpack, and accuses Binyamin of stealing it, wants to keep him as a slave. You know, what's going on here? What's the whole story here? So the Ramban explains in the following way. The bottom line is, according to the Ramban, is that Yosef remembers his dreams. And Yosef remembers his dreams means that Yosef realizes, and Yosef always realized, according to the Ramban, that these dreams were basically a prophecy. And they had to be fulfilled. They had to come true. And now, with Yosef seeing his brothers there, Yosef remembers his dreams. And Yosef now realizes that he can bring about the fulfillment of those dreams. Now let's review those two dreams. One dream was that they were all, bundling sheaves in the field. Yosef's sheaf stands up and, gets erect, stands erect. The other one, and then it says the other ones came and bowed down to his sheaf. Now that is a dream that includes him and his brothers. And, as the Ramban points out, that Yosef, when he said to the brothers about that dream, the wording was, Vinei anachnu ma'almim alumim. We are bundling sheaves. We means all of us, all the brothers. All the brothers means, right, that his sheav, they're all bundling sheaves together. That includes who? Binyamin, everybody. Everybody was bundling sheaves. Okay, so you got the first dream that involves his brothers. All the other sheaves represent his brothers. And the sheaves bow down means that there's going to be a point where Yosef is going to rise and they're all going to bow down to him. The second dream was where you had Yosef and there was the sun and the moon and 11 stars, and they all bowed down to him. So in the second dream, not only do you have the brothers bowing down, but you have his father bowing down. Okay? Yosef understands that these dreams have to be fulfilled, and they have to be fulfilled in order. The first dream is where his brothers bow down, and the next dream is where his father and his brothers will bow down. So, Yosef sees his brothers. How many brothers are here with him now? 10. One's missing. But they all bow down. That reminded him of the dreams that he had. But that's not the fulfillment of the dream, because only 10 brothers, not 11. So therefore, he hatches a plot to get Binyamin to come down. And that plot is by saying they're spies and getting him to say that they have a brother left in the land of Canaan. And he says to them, you want to prove that you're innocent? Bring down your brother. And what does he do in order to make sure they come back? He takes one brother, Shimon, and he puts him in, and he holds him, I don't like, it's kind of sensitive to say it, but he holds him as a hostage to make sure that they come back. Okay. Now, eventually, Binyamin comes down. And what do all 11 brothers do? They bow down. Okay. Now that you have 11 brothers bowing down, the first dream has been fulfilled. Okay, now it's time to fulfill the second dream, which would mean when Yosef then, in next week's Parsha, reveals himself to his brothers, that is going to bring Yaakov down to Mitzrayim, and they're all going to bow down, and that'll be the fulfillment of the second dream. Now, we're still going to have to explain the part of this whole story about when Yosef puts his goblet into Binyamin's sack, and accuse him of stealing. What was that about? But before we go into that, this is how the Ramban explains what is happening at this point when Yosef is trying to get Binyamin to come down. He is trying to bring about the fulfillment of the dreams that he had. And the Ramban points out, and if this was not the reason for it, then Yosef, the wording of the Ramban is, if this would not have been so, Yosef would have been committing a terrible sin. Letzaris aviv, to bring suffering to his father, and to leave his father without him, and at a certain point of time for Shimon for many, many years. How did he do that? How do you have a right to do that on his father's cheshbon, as we say, on his father's cost? It had to be that Yosef had a worthwhile enough reason to do all this. And that worthwhile reason was to bring about the fulfillment of the dreams. The Ramban also points out that, why, and this is also a question that many commentaries ask, at some point of time, Yosef is down in Egypt. He's doing pretty good for a slave. He's doing pretty good. He's in charge of his master's house. Wouldn't that be a great time to send a message to his father? That here I am, I'm alive and well? The Ramban says not that far from Mitzrayim to Eretz Canaan. It doesn't take that long. He says even it would have taken a year. He should go in and tell his fathers he's there. The problem is that he understood that if he tells his father that he is in Egypt, what's his father going to do? Father's going to get him back. His father is going to pay all the money in the world to get him back. And if that's what happens, the dreams aren't going to come true. Yosef knows there is no way that he is going to be able to have everybody bowing down to him if he's back at his father's house. But once he's in Egypt and he already kind of senses that things are going his way, especially when he becomes the viceroy of Egypt, then already that's clear to him that he needs to find a way to bring about the fulfillment of those dreams. But Yosef understands, according to the Ramban, he understands the entire time these dreams have to be fulfilled, and going back from Egypt back to his father, that wasn't going to happen there. It's interesting to think about, at the beginning when he becomes, in charge of his master's house, right? At that point of time, did he think the dreams would be fulfilled? He was a head of a household. According to the Raman, should we say already that point he started sensing that something here in Egypt could happen? Not sure exactly. But he does say, the Ramban, that Yosef did not send a message to his father because of the fact that he understood that he needs these dreams to be fulfilled, and it wasn't going to happen there in Yaakov's house. It was going to happen here in Egypt. So therefore, the entire point of what Yosef did here was in order to bring about the fulfillment of the dreams. So the first time he sees his brothers bowing down, that's only 10 of them, but that reminds him of the dream. He now needs to go ahead and get Binyamin down here for the first dream to be fulfilled of 11 of them bowing down to him. He gets Binyamin down, okay? And now the situation is already good that he can go ahead and now reveal himself and say that, and to reveal himself and get his father to come down. And again, the Ramban points out, just go back for a second, the first time his brothers came, he didn't say to them, "Hi, I'm your brother," and prove to them that he was their brother like he did when he eventually did reveal himself, because he understood clearly at this point that this is about bringing about the fulfillment of the dreams. Okay, but there's still one more point we need to explain, and that is as to what is the story about this part where he puts the goblet in Binyamin's sack and accuses him of being a thief, and he says, he'll stay here as my slave. Everybody else can go back. What was that about? Yeah, it would seem that at this point in time, Binyamin came down. First dream is fulfilled. Now it's time to reveal himself and get his father to come down. So the Ramban says something very interesting here. He says perhaps that Yosef was actually afraid for Binyamin to be alone with the other brothers. Until now, Binyamin is together with his father. Now Binyamin has to come to Yosef because they needed Binyamin in order to get the food. But now, if they go back with Binyamin, so Binyamin is basically now at their mercy. And Yosef was afraid that perhaps the same way they were jealous of him, they were jealous of Binyamin too. Because although Yosef was, as we mentioned, the wise son and everything, but there was another aspect, both to Yosef and Binyamin, and that was that they were the sons of Raphael. That was Yaakov's main wife. So if Yosef was favorite son number 1, Binyamin was favorite son number 2. And the Ramban was concerned that may have caused a jealousy of the brothers towards Binyamin, as they had for Yosef. And that concerned him, that perhaps they would turn on Binyamin as they did on him. Or, he says, maybe Binyamin already kind of suspected that they had a hand in Yosef's disappearance. And because of that, there already was going to annul the name katat v'sina, and already there was hard feelings between them. So again, to have Binyamin go alone with his brothers was something that Yosef was concerned. So Yosef had to keep Binyamin under his watch until he could prove to himself that the brothers wouldn't harm Binyamin. When he would see that the brothers would actually stand up and be ready to fight for Binyamin, that is when he was comfortable to let all the brothers go back together. Because if Yehuda, who was as in next week's parsha, if Yehuda, who is the leader of the brothers, was going to go ahead and say to Yosef, "You got to let Binyamin go back and not leave Binyamin there," and as the Midrashim say, he was ready to fight a war in order to get Binyamin out, that already meant that the brothers did not hold anything against Binyamin, and therefore Yosef could reveal himself and allow Binyamin to go back with his brothers to his father. So this is how the Ramban approaches this entire part of the story, this entire episode. Now it's interesting to note, and I'm going to end off with a question, and I'm not going to have an answer for it, but it's an interesting question that you should know, and that is that that the Chassam Sofer, Yaakov Kamenetsky, both ask a question on Yosef, on this explanation of the Ramban, I'm sorry. And basically they say, Yosef had a dream. Okay, Hashem is revealing to him what's going to be. Is it really Yosef's, is it Yosef's business to make sure the dream should come about?
Yeah, what is what else?
Ramban says yes, but the other commentaries question that. Again, he's doing this with his father suffering. The Ramban is saying that Yosef is ready to make his father suffer to bring about the fulfillment of those dreams. And they all say, who says it's Yosef's responsibility to do that? Hashem reveals something to Yosef. Yosef, you do your part. You honor your father. Don't cause your father is suffering. How the dream is going to come about? That's Hashem's problem, not yours.
But if this is prophecy, what is the idea to stage?
Not all prophecies are meant to go ahead and tell and say over. Not all prophecies are about you have to do something, right? The Jewish, somebody pointed out to me, Hashem pointed out to Abraham that his children will be in exile and enslaved. Was he supposed to do something about that?
Why does this happen?
You're letting him know it happens. Maybe there's some kind of preparation you got to go for. You have to get ready for. But it's not like it's like there are prophecies where you're told and you let it happen. You let it be. So many of the commentaries ask on this approach of the Ramban that, Yosef has to honor his father. If he has to honor his father, then you're saying that Yosef has such a responsibility for the dreams to come about to be fulfilled on account of his father's suffering. He has his responsibilities to his father, and the rest is in Hashem's hand. There's a Gemara in Brachas that they bring down that says like this. Gemara in Brachas says that we know that there was a king Chizkiyo. He was deathly ill, and he was visited by the prophet Yeshaya. And the Gemara says a whole back and forth between them. And the prophet Yeshaya, the prophet Isaiah says to Chizkiyahu Melech, you're going to die. Why? Because you didn't have children. Chizkiyahu intentionally didn't have children. So Chizkiyahu says, I'll tell you why I didn't have children. Because I know through the power of prophecy that if I have a child, that my child is going to be a terribly wicked king. And he was. His son was Menashe. And Menashe was a very wicked king. And he knew that, and through prophecy, he knew that's what could come out from his child. So he said, I'm not going to have children then. And you know what Yeshaya said to him?
Not your business.
Not your business. You do your mitzvah, and the rest is in Hashem. So using that Gemara, they ask, that should apply here too. You got to do what you have to do. That is to honor your father. How it's going to be with Hashem's plans, that's Hashem's business. That is the way, that's the question that they ask. But this is a very interesting, interpretation of the Ramban on what Yosef was doing here with his brothers. Okay, now before we end, just want to share with you a thought on Chanukah. Okay, this is, I'm going to share, a thought from Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. And I just think that the way he lays out what Chanukah is about is done in a very powerful and beautiful way. So he says like this: it's a broad picture of what happened on Chanukah. So on Chanukah, we know that the Greeks were in control. The king was a man named Antiochus, and Antiochus was a king who made decrees against the Jewish people against the observance of Torah, punishable by death. Basically, as Rav Hirsch points out, the first ruler of the Jewish people, the first foreign ruler of the Jewish people, give the Jewish people the ultimatum of either abandon Judaism or die, which we know happened throughout Jewish history. The first one to do that was Antiochus. He was the first one. Later on, you had the Crusades, you had the Inquisition doing that. He was the first one to do that. He says, because if you look at it, we have 4 exiles. You have the exile of Egypt, you have the exile of Babylonia, Persia, Persia's one, Greece, and then Rome. And he says, Egypt was about slavery. That's what it was about, slavery. Yeah, slavery has its repercussions, but it was about slavery. Babylonia, Rome, was about conquest. That's what it's about. It's about conquest. And they conquered the land. And as a matter of fact, the way he says it, and if you're under Persian rule, I know Haman made problems, but other than that, life was pretty good. Especially when the Persian king let the Jewish people go back to Eretz Yisrael to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Greece was different than the rest of them. Greece was an attack against Torah. It was an attack against the Jewish way of life. As Hirsch, the way Hirsch puts it very beautifully, he says, more important than their freedom, more important than their possessions, which all these things were in some way taken away from them in the other exiles. But what was even more important to the Jewish people was their religion, their Torah. And that is what Antiochus went after. And he basically told them that the point here is, you observe the mitzvahs of the Torah, death. And with that, besides now, again, forbidding Torah observance by with the punishment of death, he went ahead and he brutalized the Jewish people. As he says, death was the penalty for the fulfillment of every religious obligation. The chastity of the home, the purity of the home was brutally ravaged. The Beis Hamikdash was desecrated. Idols were put in. The renunciation of the one God and sacrificing to idols were to be enforced by the terror of death. Then fell the first corpses for the survival of the Torah. There were people who gave up their lives for it. Now he says like this. Then, when the faithful had fallen, when the weak were beginning to falter, when all that spelled Israel seemed lost, before Matisyahu came, the situation was horribly bleak. You had a rulership that was threatening a death penalty for observance. You had the majority of the Jewish people becoming misyavnim, Hellenists, which means they accepted the Greek way of life. They abandoned Torah, they accepted the Greek way of life. Not only that, they actually joined up with Antiochus to make sure that the Torah wasn't observed. At that point of time, when all felt lost, then arose Matisyahu, the son of Yochanan the Kohen, and his sons. Now listen to this. It's so beautiful. He did not count the number of those who were like-minded. He had faith in the spirit of Hashem, who endows the spirit with victory over ruthless violence. He didn't look how many people he had in his army, because if he did, it wouldn't have bothered. But he understood that Hashem is going to give the power of victory over ruthless violence. He rose up to fight against this devastating frenzy and caused the weakness of the faithful to be victorious, completely victorious over the violence of the presumptuously arrogant. That's the first step. And just as God watched over the security of the spirit of Israel amid the violence and rage, and caused the light of Israel to be rekindled by the flaming spirit which still shone pure in the breast of one man, right? There was one man in his family that the light of Torah was still burning. And because of that, Hashem showed that he'll watch over the security of the spirit of the Jewish people. Through Matisyahu's self-sacrifice, his dedication, Hashem showed, I will make sure, I will watch over the spirit of the Jewish people, of the Torah, to remain and to be able to continue, even amidst all the violence. Now, through the victory of the war, he showed that he is there to secure the spirit of the Jewish people. He declared by a visible symbol that in time of desolation, he watches over and is the spirit of Israel. As soon as the tyrants were banished, the land cleansed, and the temple purged with idolatrous abominations, the menorah, the telling symbol of the God-created spiritual light of Israel, was rekindled. The menorah represents the light of the Jewish people, the light of Torah, the light of their neshama. Okay, so what happened? They come back to the Beis Hamikdash, they take it back, they light the menorah. The menorah is the symbol of the light of Torah, the light of the Jewish people. But only one cruse of oil, enough to last one day, was found still unfiled. And what happened? He who watches over Israel's spiritual light caused it to last for 8 whole days until fresh oil was prepared. This sign our ancestors grasped fully. What was the sign? The sign was, now with that miracle of the oil, Hashem is saying, I will make sure, whatever it takes, I will make sure that the light of the Jewish people continues to burn. That came out through the war, and then it came out in a symbol, in an act. It came out in the light of the menorah. The fact that it miraculously continued to burn was a symbol that Hashem is saying that I am there to protect and to secure the light of the Jewish people. And because they understood that sign, they then established Chanukah. So here's the concluding paragraph. Each year, when the Chanukah season recurs, lights are kindled in every home of Israel and by every son of Israel. And the events of those days are celebrated in word and in song, paying homage to God. Thus, the darkened courses of Israel are lit by this message. The spiritual light of Israel will never be dimmed. The spiritual light of Israel will never be dimmed. And even if round about you everything becomes defiled by the oppression of the time, so long as the light remains pure within the confines of only one house, or within the breast of only one man, live on joyfully amid all the wanton aberration, even die joyfully under the frenzy of a madman, for the spiritual life of Israel is saved. God watched over it, and even by the light of one man, he rekindles it anew. It's unbelievable. And when he says these words, even die joyful in the frenzy of a madman.
This is his word.
Yeah, his words. Now, the friend dying joyful in the frenzy of a madman is going on to Yachas. But when we read these words, what comes to our mind?
This is good writer.
It's something of the future that came after him. But the point is that as long as you have that Hashem tells us in Chanukah that the light of the Jewish people is secure. As long as there is going to be somebody out there that keeps that fire burning within them, that one person, that one family, that one house will be the means by which Hashem will fulfill his promise to the Jewish people of securing their light for eternity. Have a wonderful evening and a happy Chanukah.